Hey there fellow gamers, and welcome back to Nellie's Nerd Cave, where we dive deep into the world of gaming and tech. And today we're looking at the hardware available on Facebook Marketplace. And is it really up to the challenge of today's modern gaming? Join me in a moment and we'll find out. Welcome back to Nellie's Nerd Cave. And after trawling through the vast array of gaming computers out there on a well-known marketplace, I was looking at all these computers and found a huge amount of these being things like the i7-2700, the i7-3770 and the i5-4590, all claiming that they are 120 FPS gaming PCs. The fact that the i7-2700 is a 14-year-old processor has no meaning to some of these sellers, and most, as you can see from the screenshots, have no mention of the graphics capabilities, even though you can see the thing in the pictures. How is anyone able to sell one of these without a list of at least the basics, RAM, etc., to make sure people are buying what they need? So can these PCs run games at 120 FPS? Let's have a quick look. So while dumpster diving in my vast collection of bits and pieces, I've put together one of the average spec computers that we see on Facebook Marketplace all the time. I've put the Windows 10 64-bit operating system on. I have a Core i5-4590, which seemed to be about the average processor that they were kind of touting on Facebook Marketplace, with a 3.3 GHz base clock. It has 4 cores and 4 threads. Now, this should be okay for some games, but can it do 120 FPS? This particular processor, the 4590, was released in 2017, so it's an 8-year-old processor. With it, what I've also put is I've paired with it with some RAM. These are two 8GB sticks of HyperX Genesis. They're running at 16 GB, running at 2133 MHz. For storage, I have my trusted Kioxia Xperia 480GB SSD with the operating system on, and a separate crucial SSD with 1TB of space just for the games. The motherboard you see here, this is an MSI Z87 G45 gaming board. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this platform to see how it actually performs on games that they advertise. Now, a lot of these particular adverts that you see on Facebook Marketplace are kind of looking at things like Counter-Strike 2 and Fortnite at 120 FPS. So what I'm kind of going to do then is I'm going to look at just those two games for this particular instance, because that's what everybody seems to be advertising these particular machines running at. Advertising them as gaming doesn't necessarily mean that they can do that. So I'm going to test those and see what actual frames per second we get. We're also going to see what it takes to get to that golden number that they actually state of 120 frames per second. All the games that I'm going to run, so both those games I'm going to be setting onto medium settings, and I'm going to do that to start with. I'm going to have the resolution set to 1920 by 1080 because that tends to be the standard according to the Steam survey. I'll let the game itself sort out the rest of the settings for me. Then I'll move to the low settings to see if this makes any difference whatsoever. So let's start with the card that seems to be popular in a lot of these builds. This one, the RX 570. Here we have the MSI Armor 8GB Overclocked Edition. It released in 2017. It's really a pretty good card with a base clock of 1168 MHz. It has 2048 shader units, 128 TMUs, 32 ROPs and 32 compute units. This was a great budget card of its time. So first up with the tests is Counter-Strike 2, again set on medium like I mentioned before with 1080p. We have a steady frame rate of between 90 and 100 frames per second. and you can see the frame times are not very good at all. This is meaning that the game itself lags quite a bit. You might not pick this up on your end, but my god does it lag. Not really very good at this present moment in time. Now, let's see what happens when we change the settings to low. Once we've done that, you can now see that the frame rates jump to between 100 and 110. Sometimes, when we have to reset the game because we've died, we get 160 frames per second, but that's expected within something like the menu. But gameplay is okay. The frame times again make for a very, very laggy experience. And kind of looking at this, we're nowhere near the golden number of 120 frames per second as advertised. So let's move on and have a look at how this card fares on medium settings in Fortnite. Again, please excuse my gameplay. I don't normally play this game and I've recently just set this up, so no real idea of what I'm doing with this. We have a steady frame rate of between 33 and 52 frames per second. And you can see again that the frame times are really, really bad. And all this again meaning that the game lags quite a bit. Again, you're probably not picking this up on your end, but it stutters quite a lot and it's not really good. And when changing to this game to low settings, you can see that again, nowhere near that 120 FPS, we're actually getting between 75 and 90. So, not a very good experience. All in, the RX 570 doesn't really perform up to the Facebook Marketplace expectations and therefore would lead to your gaming experience being not very good and pretty much useless sometimes. During the period I played these games, there was a lot of stutters, and when it had finished and I was dead, so no good at all for general gameplay. It just stuttered all over the place and it made the gaming experience a little frustrating to say the least. So now we have seen these results, let's have a quick look at another one with a different graphics card in there, which is another popular one. And it always goes in some of these adverts of the GTX 1650. This little card here. This particular one is from Palette. This is the Game Pro 4GB version, first released in 2020, so quite modern to be fair, but not as modern as some of the RTX cards. It has a base clock of 1410 MHz. It has 896 shader units, 56 TMUs and 32 ROPs. This particular little card is excellent as a boost to your performance overall. Now let's see how this fares with the two games that we've been running recently. Again, we're going to start this time with Fortnite, and this is even better than I thought. On medium settings, we are getting frame rates of between 39 and 66 frames. It is very playable here. However, the CPU is constantly at 100%, so there is some stuttering from the bottleneck between the CPU and the card. Changing the game into low settings, the frame rate is no different. However, the lag between the CPU and the graphics, having to process the game and then to display it, again is not very good. You can see the frame times are not good either, and it does stutter considerably. In Counter-Strike 2, it seems that the medium settings on this game have given me a good frame rate of between 50 and 75 frames per second. Still a few stutters with the CPU, but much better. In low settings, we're looking at between 75 and 91 frames per second, which is much improved over the medium settings. But who wants to play on low settings anyway? So, how can we improve this whole thing? We're nowhere near the 120 frames per second. We're nowhere near capable of running anything like it. So with all that being said, how could we improve this? We have a graphics card that is more than capable, the GTX 1660, but we can't hit that 120 frames per second yet. But what if we were to upgrade the CPU to an i5 4460 and then maybe push it to the i7 4790K, with this processor now adding extra threads to the mix, increasing our thread count from 4 to 8. Let's have a look at the charts here. So we can see from the chart the frame rates increased slightly with the 4460 with medium settings with an average FPS of between 55 and 90. It was 90 FPS in low, and when we switched to the 4790 with hyper-threading and those wonderful 8 threads, we jumped to 104 FPS for medium and 132 for low. So we still didn't get 120 FPS until we hit low settings. Again, who wants to play these on low settings? The good thing here is, unlike other tests, the processor for the 4790K did not max out at 100%. It rather stayed at a nice 90 to 91%, giving us a teeny tiny little bit of headroom there for other games and maybe a little bit more quality. The 4790 here is for sale in my local computer exchange for £45, which is a pretty reasonable price to pay for a great upgrade. Don't get me wrong, it won't play the AAA games like Doom the Dark Ages because it doesn't do ray tracing, and as the GTX doesn't have anything like that. So it won't even launch. But if you want to play Fortnite, it's a great starting PC with plenty of oomph to get you into a great gaming session for those particular games. For the price these people are selling the so-called gaming PCs, you could buy an i7 4790K with 16 gigs of DDR4, a 1TB hard drive and an RTX 2080 for £295 from my local computer exchange. At least that way you can upgrade the platform at some point and have basic RT cores on the 2080. Which seems a bit of a better bargain than the GTX 1650 or the RX 570. It really is up to you what you want to choose, but I wouldn't get one from Marketplace as they are too low spec, and when you try to upgrade, in most cases you can't do it. Take one of these with the i7 3770K. This is the top processor for the 3rd generation, and you can't go any further than that without upgrading the motherboard and the CPU, and in some cases the actual cooler as well, because it produces more heat. So with all my testing done, I hope you will learn something today, which is please don't buy things from Facebook Marketplace. It doesn't really help with you spending your hard-earned money when you could buy something better from your local computer exchange. And if you have, thanks for tuning in to Nellie's Nerd Cave. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more tech and gaming content. And until next time, happy gaming and stay nerdy.